upcoming UFO report to Congress is the most anticipated report on the subject of UFOs ever, but those expecting full disclosure might be disappointed. A recent report in the New York Times suggested American intelligence officials are discounting that the aerial phenomena witnessed by Navy pilots are of alien origin. Most UFO devotees would have responded with, "Wait, what?" As Paradigm Research Group Executive Director Stephen Bassett suggested in our recent interview. The report is nothing. I don't even think it's that big of a deal. That would have disappointed many UFO believers. But Bassett knows what he's talking about. Having been at the forefront of the UFO disclosure issue for more than a quarter of a century, he has a theory on what's going to happen. Bassett believes the UFO report to Congress, due to be released in late June 2021, is just part of a larger process. Meanwhile, as far as the recent New York Times article is concerned, his response should be heartening for UFO believers desperate for disclosure. What's Bassett's advice? He says, "Ignore this. It's a lie." Of course, the Dodd can't say otherwise at this point. The great news is that mainstream media is now consistently talking about UFOs almost daily. The NYT article was almost expected by skeptics believing the whole UFO report to Congress was just a satisfy the masses exercise. In Bassett's recent interview with Aliens Revealed Live, he talked about people now getting on the disclosure train. What does that mean? Essentially, those on the wrong side of the long-running truth embargo on UFOs are now positioning themselves to look good post-disclosure. Bassett says, the New York Times article is part of a public relations-driven extrication process. This is what is important. This is what matters. The United States has the highest military technology in the world. Period. Everyone in the Pentagon down to the floor polishers knows this. US military technology is equal to or greater than that of China, Russia, Canada, UK, France, Peru, Somalia, and the rest of the 200 countries and sovereign entities. Therefore, there is only one option left to explain not 120 incidents over the past 2 decades, but thousands of incidents since 1947, and that explanation is extraterrestrial. Period. The Dodd has just confirmed the ET presence in the only way it could in cooperation with the Senate Intelligence Committee to provide an appropriate basis for congressional hearings to be called for by Mark Warner and Marco Rubio. These hearings will then provide the context for President Biden to end the truth embargo. A confirmation. You are witnessing a public relations-driven extrication process. Your government is finally moving to extricate itself out from under a 74-year institutional lie in order to soften the blow. It wants to look as good as possible, get as much credit as possible, or simply to get the job done. Or put another way, the principal institutions and persons have to lie their way out of the lie. So, what's next? ARL's Dean Caparella says he's not sure, but it will be fascinating watching the next move leading up to the release of the UFO report. Stephen Bassett says the ultimate goal of the report to Congress is to get congressional hearings. He expects they could happen as early as late July or in August. That would be something to see. Meanwhile, Bassett says while he has been fighting for disclosure since 1996, he cannot make it happen. He says he is leading a movement whose ultimate goal is to arrive at a point where the President of the United States can finally confirm to the American public that there is an extraterrestrial presence. Bassett says, to get to all that other information first, the president has to finally acknowledge that there is an extraterrestrial presence. And other nations should follow. I mean, it won't just be the United States, it will be every nation in the world. The point is that a head of state from every nation in the world will fall in line and confirm it. So that's my job, to make sure we arrive at that point. Bassett explains his role in the following excerpt from his interview with Aliens Revealed Live's Dean Caparella.
I was going to ask this question towards the end of the interview, but I thought I might just kick it off by asking you, is your role to actually make disclosure happen or condition people to the idea of it and how to handle it when it happens?
It's a very good question. I personally cannot make disclosure happen. This I can confirm. Mm-hmm. My role as the activist is to, and I consider myself part of a movement, but I call the disclosure movement, disclosure activist movement, advocacy movement, is to do my part to help move it along.
Right.
The goal of the movement is very clear. It is to arrive at a point where the President of the United States can finally confirm to the American people that there's an extraterrestrial presence, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not alone. Okay, that is disclosure. That's it. All the other information and all that other might come out is after that. But to get to all that other information, first the president has to finally acknowledge that there is an extraterrestrial presence, and
Right.
other nations will follow. I mean, it won't just be the United States. Every nation in the world that I can't imagine anyone that wouldn't. There's some very tiny countries. The point is that the head of state of every nation in the world will fall in line and confirm it.
Yep.
So that's my job, is to do that. All right. Okay. Now, the process that has to go down is complicated and involves a lot of people who are not activists. They are journalists, or they work at the Pentagon, or they're a politician or a member of Congress, so forth. And so as this thing moves forward, there are things that they can't say.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that. They have to go about this in a certain way to get it done. And so with respect to everybody you've been hearing about in the news for months now, we're all on the same page. I want disclosure, and I believe they do too. But there are things that they cannot say that I can. And that's my job, is to speak truth to power. I'm not part of their process per se. I support it, but I speak truth to power. And the principal reason for that is this: the goal. My job is to close the back door. There has been a number of attempts to get this issue resolved. There have been a number of attempts to get congressional hearings, and they all got cut off at the pass, or blocked, squashed.
Mm-hmm.
And while this situation now is unprecedented and moving forward at an extraordinary pace, that doesn't mean that suddenly the people involved lose their nerve, or some power centers within the military intelligence complex get control of it, and everybody finally decides, we got another day. We'll hold this off for another day, and then they just leave by the back door. My job is to lock the back door, so
Right.
There's no going back, only going forward. So that's one way to look at what I do.
Yeah.
Now, okay, go ahead.
I was going to ask about the conditioning of people to the idea of disclosure, but I'm thinking by now most people would be conditioned to it.
I hate to use the word conditioning.
Yeah.
Let's just say inform and educate. One of the jobs, I think, of all the people in this field, whether they're researchers or journalists or activists, have been informing the public about this issue for 75 years. And they didn't get paid much. The government was denying the fundamental truth of what they were engaging. It has been a tough slog. It has been very difficult. But the fact is, thousands of books have been written about the ET issue, the UAP ET issue. Probably 30,000 articles or more have been written by mainstream journalists. And that's just, maybe 20, 25,000 in English language press, and then tens of thousands more in foreign language press. And of course, there have been documentaries. Then came the websites. Now we got the podcasts. So the people that are in the UAP, ET, research activist journalist movement have invested good portions of their lives and generated massive content to help inform the world's people about this. And they've done a pretty good job. And that information that they have put out has made it a lot easier for people to understand and read between the lines regarding what the governments are doing. And it's also going to make it much easier for them to deal with the disclosure event when it comes, and be prepared then to how to participate after disclosure in the post-disclosure world. So the education process was a key component of the activism. And in the activist realm, again, the researchers are providing a lot of information. and they work within certain frameworks. Same thing for the documentarist. The activist framework is a little different. The activist is ultimately less constrained. Things that they could really put in a doc, or can't put that in the book, or can't say this about this government agency or whatever, the activist can and will. That's why they call it speaking truth to power. Because usually you got to break the rules sometimes. You have to step outside the protocols. And I have a phrase about referring to that I put out there. This is mine.
Yeah.
History, no, this is mine. I'm trademarking it. And that is because I've studied the activism of and activist movements of the past, particularly the important ones. That if you're an activist and you are pressing an issue forward, you're pressing for something, and you're wrong. Meaning what you're trying to get across is actually wrong. You didn't get it right. You're wrong. People don't like you. Who can blame them? But when you're right, people really don't like you.
Wow.
So that's the path. And if you're not prepared to deal with that, do not become an activist.